Well, howdy folks. Dim those lights. Crank up a gentle breeze from a creaky old fan and settle in for a trip back to when the frontier was less a Kodak moment and more a bone-numbing gauntlet. Picture yourself blinking awake in a rickety cabin somewhere on the high plains, circa 1870. Your first breath isn't fresh pine or morning dew. It's a guerrilla warfare of odors, stale sweat, fermenting animal droppings, and something suspiciously sewer-adjacent. Bathing, that luxury's reserved for town fairs, if you can save enough water for a ceremonious once-a-month rinse. Most folks let winter slide by without so much as a proper wash, since every precious drop was earmarked for drinking or cooking. You haul yourself out of a mattress stuffed with straw and bedbugs, groaning like a rusty gate on its last hinge, your muscles already protesting 8 hours of hauling water, chopping wood, or wrestling stubborn mules before breakfast. Forget weekend spa retreats. Out here your body is your paycheck, and the only PTO involves hobbling around with arthritis by age 30. If you think your modern office job strains you, try a day spent plowing fields, carrying sacks of feed, or inching through a mine shaft that smells faintly of dread and dynamite. The average frontier lifespan tanks in the mid-30s, largely because life is one endless set of chores designed to break you. Speaking of breaking, winter inside a frontier cabin can dip below 20 degrees. You'll stoke the fire until the logs turn to embers, fuel's too precious to bank through the night, only to awake again chilled to the bone. Summer's no kinder. The sun bakes you like a loaf of cornbread, sweat dripping into your eyes as flies dive-bomb your unwashed skin. Clothing offers zero relief. Everyone sports 2 sets of coarse denim or canvas pants and scratchy cotton shirts, while the ladies layer corsets, petticoats, and skirts that drag through dust and mud. Those glamorous outfits in the movies, pure Hollywood propaganda. Reality, everything itches, chafes, and smells of hard travel. Your stomach rumbles. Breakfast is the same as dinner. Beans, biscuits, and black coffee boiled until it could strip paint, often spiked with crushed eggshells or salt to cut the bitterness. You drink it anyway. Caffeine's the only hope you've got. Before you step outside, you shake out your boots, no joke. Scorpions and rattlers love nesting in that dark nook. One wrong stomp, and you're facing venom, miles from any doctor who knows how to handle a bite. Once outdoors, the frontier unfurls in all its savage majesty and sudden cruelty. One minute you're gazing at rolling prairies or jagged mountain peaks, the next you're knee-deep in a surprise blizzard, caught in a flash flood, or chased by a twister like nature's own Gatling gun. And if you stumble into a frontier town thinking civilization is a refuge, think again. There's no plumbing, no garbage pickup, and dirt streets that turn to quagmires in rain or dust storms in drought. Horse manure piles hip-high, flies swarm like locusts, and every sneezing fit risks cholera or typhoid. You wander into the saloon seeking relief, only to find a one-room hovel of rough-hewn boards, a scuffed bar, and liquor so vile it's often tainted with tobacco juice or worse. A single shot could blind you, but thirsty lads and land-poor ranchers line up anyway. Fisticuffs break out at the drop of a hat. This isn't your choreographed shoot-'em-up, it's raw, impulsive violence over spilled whiskey or an accidental elbow to the ribs. Almost everyone you pass carries a gun, not for showdowns at high noon but for trappers' protection against wolves, for warding off bandits on lonely trails, and yes, because signaling someone with a few paper cartridges is simpler than shouting through a gale. But don't picture dusty duels. Most towns from Dodge City to Tombstone outlawed firearms once inside city limits. Famous gunfights like the OK Corral flare up because men refused to check their six-shooters, not because they were itching for legend. Medical care offers no consolation. Doctors are few and far between. Some practiced after a brief stint reading dusty tomes. Others learned by trial and bloody error. Surgery is a screaming ordeal under whiskey or morphine. Sterilization is a fairy tale. And amputation is the go-to fix for gangrene or shattered limbs. Bloodletting, mercury tinctures, arsenic. These do-it-yourself cures often kill more than the injury. Childbirth claims 1 in 4 women. A toothache might end with your molar plucked by crude forceps, tears streaming, and no anesthesia beyond clenching your jaw. If by some miracle you're still upright at midday, you might brave the restaurant out of someone's parlor. The chicken's tough, the pork's borderline toxic, and vegetables have the texture of overboiled mush. Food poisoning and dysentery are daily lottery tickets, sometimes a winning ticket for an amputation. Later, you might visit the general store where staples cost an arm and a leg because every sack of flour or can of peaches rode cross-country by wagon and rail. Peaches cost nearly $20 in today's money. Most settlers live hand-to-mouth, buying what they need and praying for government relief that almost never comes. By afternoon, clouds gather on the horizon, another weather ambush. You race back to your drafty cabin, dousing leaky spots with buckets. Clean water is a treasure, so you haul it yourself and hope it hasn't been tainted by livestock upstream. You slump into a wooden chair and wonder how anyone endured this day and the next. And yet endure they did. As dusk falls, darkness arrives inky and absolute. No streetlights, no hum of civilization, just coyotes yipping, owls hooting, and your own heartbeat. Sleep brings no respite. Nightmares of rattlesnakes, Indian uprisings, stampedes, and the silent threat of cholera wake you in a cold sweat. If you make it through another sunrise, you face choices. Head to a boomtown's mines where cave-ins, black lung, mercury poisoning, and company scrip await. Strike out as a ranch hand, chasing cattle drives that can stampede you into oblivion. Homestead 160 arid acres, building a sod hut that leaks so badly you question your sanity. Or take wage labor in a nascent factory or railroad camp, risking industrial accidents, heat stroke, and exploitation in company towns that pay you in worthless tokens. Every path is a gauntlet of back-breaking labor, constant danger, and minimal reward. And yet some 400,000 souls braved the Oregon Trail alone, burying thousands of loved ones en route. They carved communities from wilderness, built towns brick by brick, and laid a skeleton of laws and property rights that still shape America. They endured because the promise of land, freedom, and a new start outweighed daily terror. By the time you stagger back into your rough cabin for your final night, you've tasted every frontier curse: scurvy, starvation, weather lunacy, wild beasts, ruthless lawmen, and worse. Yet you've glimpsed a beauty untouched, star-strewn skies so dazzling you'd trade all your creature comforts for one night of pure darkness. So here you lie, muscles shredded, spirit raw, mind whirling. The Wild West isn't a stage for heroes, it's a brutal proving ground demanding every ounce of grit you've got. Sleep now, dear pioneer, and dream of a world where your coffee isn't poison, your doctor knows antiseptic, and your boots don't harbor a garden of deadly critters. If tomorrow you still wake, give a nod to those ordinary men and women who shaped a nation with sweat, tears, and a stubborn refusal to quit. May their quiet courage inspire you, though. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't last a week. Before dawn breaks, you rouse yourself again. Doubtful you'll ever get used to this dawn chorus of coyotes, yipping like unhinged saws, and owls, hooting unsolicited life advice. You stoke embers for fire, mindful that any stray ember might torch your whole cabin. There's no volunteer brigade to douse your flames. Your breakfast of cold beans and stale biscuit beckons. You scrape the last bit of pork fat from yesterday's pan into your coffee, muttering that if it doesn't kill you straight away, it'll keep you running. Mounting your horse, if you manage to buy one without maxing out your meager supply of scrip, you head out to check traps for rabbit or possum. Those little critters might feed you today, or they might have gnawed their way out of your steel traps, leaving only a pathetic rattle and bruised pride. You gut whichever you catch with a rusty knife, thankful for modern Instagram influencers who've never had to skin anything more stubborn than a pumpkin spice latte. Pushing onto a distant ridge, you scan for game, dodging rattlesnakes that sun themselves on warm rocks like reptilian traffic cones. One rattle warns you off. Bravo, nature, no need for a gunshot before breakfast. You tiptoe away, cursing both the snake and the cowpoke who traded you that surefire .44 that jams after 3 shots. Later, you find yourself at the one-horse country post office. A cranky clerk named Jed perched behind a window so small he could retreat through it for a nap. Letters from home, if they arrived at all, are scrawled lines about rainy weddings and exploding potato harvests. Your only link to family life now feels like a half-finished novel missing its ending. Jed snorts when you ask for another stamp. You planning on writing the great American novel, or just desperate for ink? You swallow the jab and pay in coins that have lost 3/4 of their face value since you left the East. By noon, you're back in town for the weekly mercantile run, where the general store doubles as church, gossip hub, and accidental dentist's office when someone needs a tooth yanked. You trade a hatchet for a sack of flour if the shopkeeper's scale is honest, and pick up a patch kit for your belt.
Frontier fashion tip: belts unravel if you lean on the wrong nail. You pocket blotting paper for letters, chewing tobacco against exhaustion, wondering if those minty strips might be a thing someday. Afternoon heat drives you to the wooden boardwalk where you cram into the shade of the bank's awning, watching stagecoaches clatter by like caffeinated skeletons. Everyone's packing mail coaches with armed guards, cattle drovers hauling hides, missionaries trudging west with hymnals and naivete. You overhear talk of a newly opened gold claim 40 miles north, where a lucky strike reportedly yielded nuggets the size of hen's eggs. A week of such finds could fund you for months, but every tale seems to end with someone down to their last bullet, trapped in snow with only salt pork for company. A local preacher ambles by, bobbing his head like a rooster on a trapeze. He's hawking the upcoming revival, 4 nights of hymns, fire and brimstone sermons, and communal fasting. Yep, more abstinence in an already underfed land. You consider attending for the sake of social license, but decline, preferring to watch flies buzz the meat hooks at the butcher's stall. The preacher's wife gives you a pitying glance. You nod sagely and leave her to imagine you as a tortured sinner, thirsting not just for water but for holy absolution. By late afternoon you return to check your chickens, if the local fox didn't make a midnight snack of them. Feathers on the ground, no clucks in the coop, loss of one more breakfast protein. You squint toward the tree line, muttering about vermin treaties and the need for better livestock insurance. As dusk approaches again, you perform the nightly ritual of counting cartridges, polishing your revolver by lantern light. Lantern fuel again rationed to avoid another frozen night. You hang your clothes on hooks where an errant bat might roost, curse at the rusty belt buckle, and tuck your boots inside out to keep scorpions at bay. Night settles in thick and absolute. The wind tangles through cracks with a voice of ancient warning, and every unfamiliar rustle becomes a possible threat. Wolves padding closer, an outlaw scouting the next bank job, or simply a creak of settling log. Sleep comes in fitful bursts, dreams haunted by gnashing teeth and the echo of hoofbeats. In the cold, flickering first light you wake and realize the frontier never sleeps, and neither can you, not if you hope to live past breakfast. But if you do endure another sun, you'll carry one more story of rattlesnake gambles, scurvy-scrawled prayers, and dusty marches toward distant horizons. And though every fiber of your modern self rebels against this ragged existence, you stand, shoulder a bag of tools, and step out into a world that never promised ease, only a chance to be part of something raw, relentless, and unforgettable. Rest lightly, stranger, for tomorrow the Wild West awaits you with open arms, and possibly a cactus. Well, partner, picture this. You jolt awake in a one-room hovel pinned to the plains by endless sky and a roof that leaks like a sieve. The first thing that smacks you isn't the sight of sunrise, it's the aroma. Think of every unfortunate thing you've forgotten to wash, add the bouquet of manure from last night's barn party, and stir in what could be sewer runoff. Bathing. Ha! Around here a weekly rinse is a deluxe spa treatment, and by weekly, I mean once this century if you're lucky. That trickle of water is sacred, harnessed for coffee, cooking beans, or coaxing that one scrub on your grimy forearms. You flop off a mattress so thin you'd call it a bedbug base camp, if bedbugs weren't already your roommates. Every muscle twinges in complaint. Back-breaking labor starts at dawn, and doesn't clock out until way past sunset. Whether you're hauling water from a creek, chopping wood so the stove won't kill you, plowing fields until the oxen stage a revolt, or inching through a dark mine shaft with dynamite breathing down your neck, your body becomes a rattling testament to sacrifice. You might brag about that treadmill at home, but here you earn your steps the medieval way, by not collapsing into a heap of exhaustion. Step outside and brace yourself. Winter's chill can lag behind a blizzard that whips across the prairie like a freight train of ice. Your hearth logs burn to embers overnight. Can't hoard firewood. You'd starve the stove. Summer's no picnic either. Imagine being wrapped in denim, cotton, and scratchy wool in 90-degree heat, sweat pooling into your eyes, and every bug in the county throwing a rave on your skin. Clothes never escape the funk. Corsets and petticoats for the ladies, shred dignity and hides. One wrong twirl, and you're face first in the dirt. Those pristine outfits from your favorite Western flicks? Hollywood cover-up for the rank reality. Stomach growling? That soundtrack never quits. Breakfast is beans, biscuits, and scorched coffee. If you're bold enough to call it coffee, maybe spiced with salt or eggshell bits cunningly disguised as flavoring. But caffeine's a mercy. You gulp the sludge and brace for the day. Before you step out, shake your boots. Rattlers and scorpions love lining up under that worn leather like it's a beckoning hideout. One careless stomp, and you're auditioning for a one-act tragedy called Venom on the Prairie. Stride into town and you'll see civilization's half-hearted cameo. Dirt streets, horse droppings piled hip-high, no sewage, just a tangle of odors that could fell a bison. Saloons, 5 board walls and a bar, pour booze so toxic it could strip paint. Whiskey laced with turpentine, tobacco juice, or God only knows. 1 sip blind you, 2 might kill you, but thirsty grub-stomping cowhands slam it back and break skulls over spilled shots. Guns? Yes, almost everyone's packing, but they aren't dueling at high noon. They're warding off wolves, bandits, or the bartender's bad mood. Many towns outlaw firearms past the gates. The OK Corral shootout flared up only because some outlaw refused to check his 6-shooter, not from heroic resolve. Need medical help? Good luck. Doctor might mean someone who read a pamphlet on bloodletting once. Surgeries under whiskey or morphine drag on like a nightmare. Sterilization is a fairy tale, and a broken bone often ends with a careless amputation. No bone saw too rusty, no patient too squeamish. Childbirth? 1 in 4 mothers don't make it. Teeth pulled with crude forceps. Infections so routine they're considered character building. Death is a constant companion, whether from cholera swirling through contaminated water, scurvy gnawing at your gums, or a bandit's bullet. If you survive until lunch, wander into the local restaurant, someone's parlor with a pot over a smoky stove, tough meat, mushy vegetables, and the risk of food poisoning so high you'd rather wrestle a skunk. Swing by the general store, everything costs an arm and a leg, from flour to a tin of peaches that'll set you back the modern equivalent of $20. You trade a hatchet for a sack of beans, pocket chewing tobacco for energy, and hope your letters from back east haven't been lost in Jed's perpetually napping post office. Come afternoon, you might saddle your horse if it didn't break an ankle yesterday, or plod along in a squeaking wagon that jolts your spine like a mining drill. Rain turns trails to mud bogs, drought kicks up dust so thick you choke, mountain passes demand 14 layers and 3 days worth of grit. The Oregon Trail? They called it the nation's longest graveyard, for a reason. Cholera kills faster than stampede thunder, rivers swallow wagons whole, and children vanish like daydreams. 1 in 10 never make it. At day's end, dusk arrives with no lights but stars, brilliant, immeasurable, silent. Coyotes yip, owls lecture you on your poor life choices, and every shadow might hide a pack of wolves or an outlaw with a score to settle. You count your cartridges, park your boots upside down to keep scorpions at bay, and whisper a prayer if you remember the words. Sleep is a shaky gamble, nightmares of rattlesnakes in your bedroll, the echo of hoofbeats that might be rescue or pursuit. Wake up tomorrow and you'll do it again. Hunt rabbits, juggle rabbit traps and rattlers, check your chickens for fox treaties, trade currency that's lost half its value, and wonder how anyone outlived 24 hours. These aren't heroes in 10-gallon hats. They're ordinary souls with grit for breakfast, hope for lunch, and exhaustion by sundown. If you still stand at day's close, you've earned your place in history, etched not by glory but by sheer, unrelenting survival. So rest easy if you can, and remember, out here every sunrise is a victory, every meal a feast, and every heartbeat a stubborn middle finger to the impossibility of it all. I'll haul yourself upright again before the dawn star fades. No roosters crow to jolt you, just the prairie's hush and the knowledge that snoozing means frostbite. Today you've sworn you'll try your hand at prospecting. Those legends of clinking gold nuggets the size of chicken eggs have lodged in your brain like a broken record. You saddle your steed, that ornery sorrel who balks at every fence rail, then trudge toward the hills, pick and pan strapped to your pack. By mid-morning you're knee-deep in a freezing creek, hunching over a rusty metal pan, swirling muck and gravel until your arms scream. Every handful of sand you lift is another sandpaper handshake with the devil. A speck of gold glimmers, your heart surges until grit slicks off the tiny flake and you realize you've pried it from your own fingernail. You curse the river, the nation's longest graveyard, and the dream riders who promise fortunes. A sudden chill warns of a storm brewing over the ridgeline. You scramble to secure your gear, praying your blanket-rolled lunch of salt pork and hardtack survives the squall. It does, barely, tasting like ash and regret. By lunch your joints ache worse than after a month of chopping oak for cabin repairs. You've swallowed more river water than you care to admit, and already missed 2 expert river crossings. You almost lost your hat, your mule, and possibly your wits. You scoop up a handful of muddy grub, pair it with tepid coffee, and dream of a town saloon's liquor, before remembering that moonshine down there could etch through brain tissue. Afternoon light shadows your weary path to a nearby cattle drive. You figure at least wrangling beasts is steadier work than prospecting. You hitch a ride with a drover named Hank. He's a soft-spoken giant with a hat 2 sizes too big and a belt buckle that's a family heirloom. You ride shotgun beside a stampede that could crush you into prairie paste at the twitch of a steer's tail. The dust cloud rises like an angry spirit. Steel-toed boots sink ankle-deep in dung. The herd moves like 1,000 broken horns. Hank hollers instructions you can't hear over the thundering thrum. On the third steer's near-leg kick, you decide cattle aren't majestic icons of the West. They're mob bosses with hooves. Nightfall drags you back to that leaky cabin, your bones rattling like loose tin pans. You polish your revolver, because even Hank warns you, you never know when a rattler won't give fair warning, and hang your coat on the one clean nail that doesn't double as a scorpion perch. You shake out your bedroll, plop onto the thin straw, and count off the day's victories. 0 gold, 1 near miss with a steer's hind leg, 3 scorpion sightings, and the personal record of 2 flecks of actual gold in your pan. Not bad, kid. As you drift in and out of dozy curses, you realize surviving the Wild West isn't about epic gunfights or cinematic showdowns. It's about staggering from sunrise to sunset, swearing at every sunrise, and still dragging your leathery hide back out to try again tomorrow. Sleep comes in ragged gasps, haunted by rattlesnakes in your boots and the endless horizon that lures you onward. If you wake again, maybe you'll try farming, though digging sod huts sounds like signing up for medieval boot camp. Or maybe you'll ride east, trade this life of dust for one of concrete and running water. But for now, you cling to one stubborn truth. In the Wild West, just waking up is a triumph. Here's to tomorrow, if it has the decency to show up. By sunrise on day 3, if you can really call it sunrise, since your cabin's thin slats let in more starlight than dawn, you haul yourself upright once more. Your limbs remind you that muscle soreness can be a lifelong companion, and you'd give 2 fingers to modern ibuprofen. You sling your saddlebag across your back, reach for your battered hat, the one you patched with bits of old leather and prayer, and step into the chill dawn. Remember that blistering storm you almost got caught in yesterday. The creek's bank is carved deeper now, and you'll need to tuck your trousers into your boots to ford it, or risk soggy legs and trench foot. Mid-morning finds you alongside a packhorse train lugging supplies from the nearest railhead. You flag down a grizzled packer who offers you a swig from his flask, a dubious concoction smelling faintly of cedar bark and last week's regrets. You count yourself lucky if it's not pure grain alcohol this time, since a single gulp could have you seeing mirages of dancing buffalo in sequin vests. In exchange for a canteen refill, you share your hardtack so stale it could double as a building material, and get directions to a silver mine you'd never heard of. By the time you find its mouth, the day's shadows have crawled long and lean across the rocks. Afternoon heat drives you back into town for essentials, a fresh roll of bandages for calf gashes courtesy of yesterday's snake tango, more coffee grounds because you're nothing if not optimistic, and a pocket of salted beef jerky that tastes like, well, salted beef jerky. You overhear a traveling preacher promising eternal salvation down by the river, but you've already lent your soul to survival. Instead, you tip your hat to a blacksmith's apprentice who repairs your pickaxe's cracked handle in exchange for a share of your lunch scraps. It's the closest thing to modern bartering you'll find. No Yelp reviews, just word of mouth and muddy boots. By sundown, you're back home. And by home, we mean that leaky shack that squeaks like a haunted door whenever the wind picks up. You batten down a few rags over the worst holes, count your dwindling cartridges, 47 unless you mislaid one during that stampede, and unstrap your bedroll. Tomorrow you'll rise again to this grand symphony of hardship, rattlers rustling the brush, pack mules braying their complaints, and the sky shifting moods in thunder and sunshine. Will you stake another claim, blaze a new trail, or hitch a ride back east, trading your days of dust for light switches and indoor plumbing? Only the dawn can decide, but whatever you choose, know this: surviving the real Wild West wasn't about 6-gun bravado or bucking broncos, it was about sheer stubbornness. It was waking before the crows, chasing game through rattlesnake-infested hills, and still trudging back when every bone in your body pleaded for mercy. So as you drift into fitful sleep on your scratchy bed of hay, whisper a tip of the hat to those dusty souls who blazed this raw frontier. They didn't have GoPros or Instagram filters, just grit, gumption, and the grit to keep going. And if you make it through another sunrise, consider yourself a bona fide pioneer, proof that sometimes the toughest trails forge the hardest heroes.
Dawn cracks on what might be day 4. Your body still can't decide whether it's in pain or perpetually sunburned, so you haul yourself upright, swearing at each groan and protest from your joints. Today's mission, tracking a bear, you glimpsed pawing at your trapline. Not a fine idea, you think, but nothing screams frontier fun like a bruise the size of a skillet. You gather your gear, a patchwork rifle you inherited from a distant cousin who got tired of missing every turkey he ever aimed at, a battered canteen half filled with yesterday's questionable creek water, and a handful of saloon-issued crackers that now taste faintly of card games and lost wages. Boots on, boot-shaking ritual to clear out scorpion squatters, and you step into the morning haze, half expecting the bear to be flirting with you just to see if you'll run. Luck smiles. You spot enormous claw marks on a nearby pine, heart thumping like a jackhammer in a tin can. You follow them until the bear himself peeks out, yawning like a lumbering sausage. You freeze, reflexively waving your arms like a one-person circus to look menacing. The bear simply blinks and lumbers toward you, apparently curious if you've got bacon on your boots. You squeeze the rifle's trigger, but it jams on its second click because of course it does, so you belt out a high-pitched war cry instead. The bear, unimpressed, drops back into the brush, clearly deciding you're not worth the effort. You exhale, knees quaking, grateful for both jammed guns and self-preservation. No blood on your hands today except your own from yesterday's creek tumble. Mid-morning haze drifts into blistering sun by the time you limp back toward town, rifle slung like a toothpick across your back. You pause outside the blacksmith's, admitting to the apprentice that you've tangled with a bear and survived. He tries not to smirk as he hammers out a patch for your rifle's barrel, silver solder from a prospector's junk, but at least the gun'll go bang if you see a rattler next time. By lunch, you're slumped in the saloon, nursing a shot of whiskey that tastes like varnish and regret, accompanied by a bowl of stew that's been boiled so long the meat has the resilience of a boot sole. A prospector at the next table regales you with tales of a new copper strike 15 miles south. Coppers pay well, he hoots, body wobbling like a newborn colt. You consider the steady thrum of hoofbeats on dusty earth appealing after 4 days of chasing dreams in rocky streams. Afternoons spent helping load sacks of grain onto a wagon for 3 cents a bushel, your proudest wage so far, hoping to afford a fresh pair of socks you can pinch out into something resembling a bath. Talk drifts to the upcoming dance at the schoolhouse, fiddles, square dancing, possibly a young schoolmom with a side braid and a kind smile. Your invitation's non-verbal, you're counting on your one clean shirt to speak for you. As the sun dips, you return to the cabin with fresh socks in hand, 2 makeshift rags you'll wear until they disintegrate. You hang them near the stove, valor vines drying in their smoky embrace. Coyote chorus highlights the evening ritual as you count bullets and mutter, 46, unless one's gone off to chase jackrabbits. You press your ear to the wall, no footsteps, just wind whispering futility. Day 4 survived. Tomorrow you vow, maybe you'll try tending a neighbor's orchard. Apples don't bite back, unless you consider dysentery a bite. But for tonight, you collapse onto the straw bed, stare at a lone nail for 10 minutes, your personal star in the cabin's firmament, then drift off, dreaming of a world with showers on tap, coffee that tastes like coffee, and bears that stay in the wild. If sunrise finds you still breathing, you'll tip your hat to another day conquered in the unforgiving Wild West. And somewhere up in the heavens, the frontier sky winks back. Well done, friend. See you tomorrow. You wake before dawn again, eyelids glued by grit and hope. Today you decide to visit Doc Muldoon, the doctor whose credentials are a faded shoelace and a once-used diploma you swear you saw taped to the saloon mirror. You stumble into his ramshackle office, a single chair, a rusty saw hanging by a nail, and jars of medicine that might contain everything from whiskey to gunpowder. He greets you with a grin that says, "I have no idea what I'm doing, but I charge by the scream." He makes you sit on a stool so wobbly you contemplate standing. Doc Muldoon listens to your lungs by slapping you on the back until you cough up yesterday's creek water, and possibly a small gravel deposit.
He inspects your swollen ankle from stepping wrong in the stampede, jabs at it with a sharpened awl, no anesthetic because he left the morphine in his other coat, then prescribes a regimen: forage for willow bark, soak it in tepid creek water, and drink it until you either feel better or die of indigestion. To seal the deal, he hands you a chalky pill the size of a chicken egg, muttering "Quicksilver cure-all." You try not to consider that quicksilver might be his quaint term for mercury. He clicks his pen, it's a bullet casing, and says, "Come back if you survive." By mid-morning you limp out clutching a brown paper sack of ambiguous remedies, stumble past Hank the drover, who offers you a flask of actual whiskey for your troubles, and decide that medical care here is best left to the bravery of goats. You pop one chalk pill, wash it down with coffee that could strip varnish, and vow to call it medicine in hopes it speeds the placebo effect. Hungry and fortified by near-lethal treatment, you wander back into town to pick up supplies. The general store's scales waver like they've had one too many frontier sunrises. You trade a half-worn leather glove for a burlap sack of beans, mindful you'll pinch every one until next harvest, if next harvest comes at all. The clerk eyes you warily as you count out your devalued coins, then slips you a lemon when you aren't looking, saying citrus is good for scurvy before you can even crack a grin. Afternoon's mission: reinforce your cabin against the coming windstorm predicted by your neighbor Old Ma Jenkins, who reads weather in cow flatulence and insists a tempest's coming. You lug planks and rusty nails back into your lean-to, hammering at crooked boards until the walls lean inward in solidarity. You patch holes with cloth and hope. Your roof is a patchwork of tin shards that clang every time a breeze suggests it's time to panic. As twilight creeps in, you head to the corral to check on Beanpole, your mule, who's eyeing you with the suspicion reserved for anyone who feeds them nothing but dust and day-old hay. You scratch behind his ears, an oxymoron since he has none, and toss him a handful of chopped oats. He chews appreciatively, granting you a fleeting sense of triumph. Nightfall brings you back inside, where you light a single candle that sputters like it's debating your life choices, then settle onto your straw mattress. You lay out tomorrow's plan, maybe prospect that silver mine, maybe hunt rabbits, maybe hitch a ride east if your courage finally quits. Before sleep envelops you, you count your supplies: 14 chalk pills, 23 cartridges, 1 mule in intermittent cooperation, and a heart stubborn enough to embrace another sunrise. You drift off to the symphony of rattlesnakes slithering past your window, and the distant howl of coyotes, nature's version of a lullaby you never asked for. In the Wild West, even sleep is earned, and tonight you've banked another hour's worth of survival against the ledger of tomorrow. By the gasp of first light, though light is generous, it's more like a pale promise. You stir awake, half expecting to see a tumbleweed rolling through the middle of your one-room mansion. You've decided today's grand experiment is ranch hand work. After all, cows can't bite you, right? Cue ominous laughter in the distance. You john your one clean shirt, the other's too rank even for the buzzards, and trundle off to Old Man Thompson's spread. He greets you with a nod that says, "You'll last exactly 9 seconds," before handing you a lasso wrapped tighter than your nerves. First task, mend a fence, because nothing says West like nailing your thumb to a rotten post. You squint at the battered hammer, delivering each blow with the precision of a blindfolded trapeze artist. Splintered wood flies. You swear you'll invent the thumb splint if you survive. Mid-morning, Thompson suggests you round up the calves. You mount Daisy, his ornery mule, who's pretty sure your behind belongs on yesterday's manure pile. She trots, if you can call it that, straight into a mud pit, flinging you off like yesterday's recipe for stew. You land face first in muck, cursing both Daisy's pedigree and your life choices. While Thompson quietly counts it a win, at least your screams didn't wake the neighbors. By midday, you're staggering toward the barn, hands still caked in sludge, when a young cowboy tips his hat and offers a swig from his flask. You take it, hoping for whiskey, but suspect the swirl of cedar and camphor suggests more medicine than merriment. Still, it warms your bones, temporarily, for the long slog of branding calves, which involves wielding a branding iron that's hot enough to singe your eyebrows if you sneeze at the wrong moment. Lunch is a communal affair. Beans again with a side serving of today's special, a biscuit so hard you could skewer it like a Jackson Pollock sculpture. Conversation around the trough revolves around last month's storm that blew half the cattle into the creek, and the rumor of a gold strike in the next county promising easy money. You snort. If gold was easy, you'd have struck it by now, bending over to pick up rocks. Afternoon draws out as you haul bales of hay, your back screaming more eloquently than any town crier. When the sun finally dips, You trudge back to the cabin with hay arrows embedded in your shirt and a bucket of creek water balanced on your hip. You slip off Daisy's saddle, which you note still smells worse than your cabin, and hang it outside with a silent vow never to ride anything with 4 feet again. Night descends like an avenging blanket. You light the sputtering candle, polish that same revolver that's jammed more often than it fires, and count your spoils: 1 unbroken finger, 1 intact shirt, 17 cartridges, and enough stories to bore a ghost. You collapse onto the straw bed, grateful the day is done, yet dread tomorrow's challenges. Because in the Wild West, no matter the hardships you've conquered, the horizon always looms with another impossible dawn. When the pale smear of dawn nudges your eyelids open, you're half convinced the wagon disaster was a fever dream, but the molasses crust in your hair says otherwise. The cabin reeks faintly of syrup and mule sweat, an aroma that would clear any civilized room, so you stagger outside to greet the new day and test your luck somewhere that doesn't involve exploding ostrich eggs. Word in town is the Telegraph crew needs extra hands, stringing wire along the ridge. 40 cents in a square meal, they say, if you can keep from tumbling off a ladder or catching a jolt that fries your eyebrows. You shuffle to the staging camp, where a foreman named Cutter hands you leather gloves so stiff they might once have been roofing shingles. He sizes you up, sees the molasses streak still matted across your collar, and mutters something about amateurs and lightning magnets. Your first task is hauling coils of copper wire up a slope so steep it feels like climbing a vertical promise. Each spool weighs more than your sense of self-preservation. By the 3rd trip, your arms are jelly, and your lungs pump like bellows on a blacksmith's bad day. 1 misstep sends stones skittering into the ravine, reminding everyone why Cutter keeps a preacher on retainer. An hour in, clouds pile up like dirty laundry over the horizon. Thunder grumbles and Cutter bellows that you'll work through it, unless lightning starts painting portraits. You clamber up a ladder driven into pine bark, holding the line while a wiry Swede named Anders swings a hammer and porcelain insulator with the finesse of a sculptor. Rain spits, then sheets. Copper becomes a slip and slide. The ladder shivers under a gust and you clamp down with every finger and prayer you know. Anders laughs, declares the weather refreshing, then loses his footing and hugs the pole like it's prom night. You haul him back to the rungs, both of you soaked and sputtering curses in 2 languages. By midday the storm has moved on, leaving steam rising off the grass and every tool wet enough to rust by supper time. Lunch is ladled from a cast iron pot that's been on the road since Appomattox, beef stew speckled with grit, served in tin cups. It tastes vaguely like salvation, or maybe that's just your sodium-depleted brain talking. You wolf it down while the cook explains that lightning killed the last greenhorn who tried stretching wire in a storm, but at least he didn't suffer long. Comforting. The afternoon brings sun so bright it feels personal. You help reel out another half-mile of line, fingers numbed until they buzz, unsure whether from current or exhaustion. Cutter finally calls a halt when a rattlesnake decides the coil pile is prime real estate. Everyone backs off while a Cherokee linesman named Thomas calmly pins the snake with a forked stick and relocates it to safer ground. You thank him with half your jerky ration and promise never to criticize serpents again because at least they're honest about wanting you dead. Quitting time arrives with a sky-streaked orange and violet. Cutter lines the crew up, doles out pay in grimy coins, and slaps your shoulder hard enough to reset a dislocated joint. 40 cents clink into your palm, real as anything you've earned yet, plus a voucher for breakfast porridge if you show up tomorrow. As you head home, the breeze carries a faint hum along the brand new wire. Morse clicks from some distant office racing through copper toward places you may never see. It feels like holding the future between thumb and forefinger. Back at the shack, you rinse in a bucket, manage to scrub away most of the molasses, and hang your shirt to dry in the smoke of the cook stove, hoping tomorrow's sweat will finish what the washboard couldn't. You jot a quick note to yourself on scrap paper pilfered from the Telegraph camp, something about sending an actual telegram east someday. Still breathing, still stubborn, stop. Then you stretch out on straw that hardly pricks anymore and count your blessings. No bear encounters, no busted wagon wheels, only minor electrocution risk and 40 honest cents heavier. Outside, wind plucks the wire you strung like a ghostly fiddle, and you doze to its distant metallic song, ready or as ready as anyone can be for whatever gamble sunrise brings next. The morning creaks in with a chill that slides down your collar like a pickpocket's fingers. You open one eye and realize the bucket you set out to catch roof drips is frozen solid, which means 2 things. First, winter's flirting in earnest, and second, you've got an impromptu ice block to gnaw if water runs short. You crack it loose, dump the shavings outside, and stamp life back into your toes while deciding whether today is a telegraph day or a find odd jobs before frostbite chews your ankles day. You opt for the telegraph camp again, lured by the promise of hot porridge and maybe another 40 cents. The sky's clear, the air thin and sharp enough to shave with, and the ground crunches under your boots like stale crackers. When you reach the line shack, the crew is already huddled around Cutter, who's nursing a busted knuckle courtesy of a stubborn mule that objected to being hitched. He waves you over, tosses you a coil of wire, and points toward the ridge. "Splice duty," he growls. Anders claims he saw sparks dancing last night. "If the joint's loose, you'll fix it, or I'll tight-wire your hide to the post." You trudge up slope with Thomas the Cherokee and Red Mary. The ridge gives a grand view: rippled grasslands, a far-off train puffing black ribbons, and snow-dusted peaks glinting like silver coins nobody will ever hand you. At the suspect splice, Mary steadies the ladder while you climb, mittens squeaking on frigid rungs. The porcelain insulator glows faintly in the early sun. Sure enough, the twist joint isn't snug. You fish out your pliers, teeth chattering Morse code, and crank the copper tight until it bites your glove. A tiny arc zaps, stings through wool, and leaves your fingers humming like tuning forks. You grunt, twist once more, and the hum smooths into silence. Success. Thomas grins up at you. Good. Message'll get through now without catching fire halfway. On the way down, you spot a bundle in the weeds, a weather-beaten canvas pouch stamped with the rail company seal. Inside, miracle of miracles, is a clutch of sealed letters and a small tin of boiled sweets meant for some station master upriver. You consider the ethics for a breath and hand the pouch to Thomas, who nods approvingly. "Good deeds earn credit somewhere," he says. "Maybe so, though you could have inhaled those sweets faster than lightning." Back at camp, Cutter hands out lunch: salt pork cooked in yesterday's bean broth, thick enough to stand a spoon in. You swallow every gritty mouthful and feel strength seep back just in time for the afternoon task: digging a new anchor hole for the line's end post. The earth's half frozen already. Every shovel hit sends jolts up your arms and curses into the wind. But Mary sets a rhythm. Thomas sings a low tune about rivers and cedar smoke, and eventually the hole widens enough to seat the timber. By dusk, the post stands proud, wire strung taut as violin strings, ready to fling news across counties as fast as a finger can tap a key. Cutter counts out coins again, 30 this time, on account of light duty, he claims. You're too tired to argue, so you pocket them and join Anders by the cook fire. He's whittling a piece of cedar into something vaguely horse-shaped. "For my boy back in Minnesota," he explains shyly. You nod, thinking how you haven't sent word home in months because stamps cost more than coffee and you're usually too busy dodging storms. Maybe tomorrow you'll brave the post office and sacrifice a nickel just to prove you're still ticking.
Night finds you back in the shack, stoking the stove with brittle fence scrap you scavenged on the walk. The flame spits but finally settles, and a welcome warmth seeps through the plank walls. You lay your damp mittens near the heat, unwrap the coin stash, 2 days' pay clinking like promise, and tuck it in the hollow under your straw tick. Through the chinks in the wall you hear the telegraph line singing faint metallic whispers, someone far away peppering the night with dots and dashes. You can't read the code, but it sounds like hope spoken in sparks. You stretch out, muscles throbbing, eyelids heavy, and wonder what winter will bring. Deeper snows, tighter boots, perhaps new work hammering rails or chopping cordwood. Whatever comes, you'll meet it with the same gritty grin, because every sunrise you've banked so far proves one thing: the West might be wild, but your stubborn heart is wilder still. You wake to the unmistakable crack of ice splitting across the water bucket. Overnight, the temperature has pitched forward into true winter, a cold so sharp your first breath tastes metallic. The stove flame guttered out hours ago, leaving only faint embers in a bed of ash. You shuffle over, coaxing the coals with kindling, but the twigs snap like glass in your numb fingers. It takes 3 matches and a string of words your mother never taught you before. A tongue of flame belts up and the cabin sighs with relief. Cutter gave everyone the day off because he's riding to the railhead for supplies, which leaves you dangerously unoccupied. The general store has posted notice of a community social tonight, a potluck, a fiddle, and the handbill crows, an honest-to-goodness kerosene chandelier borrowed from the depot manager. That's enough novelty to pull you into town early in search of something to contribute that isn't beans or your chronic smell of axle grease. At the mercantile, you discover a crate of bruised apples going cheap, half ripe, half frozen, mostly hopeful. You buy 6 with yesterday's 30 cents and pocket the other 2 coins, feeling momentarily flush. On the plank porch, you bump into Slim Pete, who's traded Plutarch for a flask of something clear and suspiciously fragrant. He informs you he's composing a frontier version of Socrates' Apology, only with more saloons. You wish him luck, tuck the apples under your arm, and head to the livery to borrow an oven. Maud, the blacksmith's wife, lets townsfolk use her Dutch oven brick hearth if they chop a stack of kindling first. You wind up swinging her splintered axe until your shoulders ache, but eventually your apple slices bubble in coarse sugar and lard, turning the shop's air into caramelized heaven, overpowering even the stench of hoof trimmings. Maud tastes a spoonful, smacks her lips, and theorizes you could charm the undertaker's horse with that smell, which passes for high praise. By dusk, the hall, actually Gideon's empty feed barn swept clean, fills with ranchers, line workers, and stray travelers. Lanterns dangle from rafters, casting long shadows across barrels repurposed as tables. Someone's auntie fiddles a reel while kids spin through sawdust like dervishes, the fiddles screech blending with laughter. Anders arrives brandishing his cedar horse, shy but proud. He plans to mail it east come spring thaw. Red Mary carries a crock of wild onion stew that could clear sinus passages clear to St. Louis. Thomas brings corn cakes laced with chokecherry syrup. Your skillet of candied apples lands between a platter of stringy roast antelope and something the cook swears is sorghum pudding, though it wobbles like boot polish. You eat until your belt pleads mercy. Conversation ricochets. Cutter announces the telegraph line reached the county border. Soon messages will fly from here to Denver in mere hours. An old trapper tells of wolves following the buffalo ghosts across the prairie, howling like lost friends. Slim Pete delivers a slurred lecture on stoic resilience, interrupted when the chandelier sputters and gutters out. Turns out someone filled it with lamp oil thinned by moonshine, and the flame grows tipsy alongside the lecturer. Laughter erupts as folks fumble for lanterns, and for a breath the barn glows only with the red coal of pipes and the silver web of winter starlight sneaking through knotholes. Outside, the night is brittle crystal. Breath hangs visibly as everyone drifts home in 2s and 3s, singing half-remembered ballads. You walk with Mary and Thomas down the crunching road, boots sparking tiny flares of frost. Mary peels a leftover apple slice from your tin, declares it passable, then slips off toward her cabin. Thomas pauses at the split where his campfire smolders blue, and murmurs that tomorrow the line gang heads farther west, more poles, more ice, but also more sky. He invites you along. Double pay for anyone willing to camp on the ridge for a week. You nod yes before sense can object. After all, sky and coins beat idle hunger. Back in your shack, you tuck the few remaining apples under straw to keep them from freezing, stoke the stove to a gentle purr, and stretch out wrapped in every scrap of blanket you own. Through the walls comes the far faint click of the telegraph, signals hopping pole to pole, perhaps carrying news of snowstorms or births or someone's lucky strike. You close your eyes, imagining each spark a story you might yet hear when spring unlocks the roads. Sleep drifts in slow and sweet, like those caramelized apples spreading warmth through your ribs. Somewhere beyond, coyotes trade gossip with the moon, and the copper wire hums like a lullaby strummed by distance itself. Tomorrow you'll shoulder coils again, tramp through snowdrifts and chase the horizon further west, but tonight the barn's laughter still echoes in your ears, proof that even on a knife-edge frontier people carve out pockets of music, sugar, and shared breath, little fires against the endless dark. The day starts before the sun even bothers with color. Cutter kicks the cabin door so hard the hinges whine in protest, barks that the wagon leaves in 10 minutes, and lobs a burlap sack at your chest. Inside are rations, salted pork, hardtack, a lump of brown sugar the size of a pistol grip, and coffee grounds older than the territory charter. You stuff it beside your bedroll, wrestle on damp boots, and join the sleepy procession shuffling toward the supply wagon like penitents late for judgment. The air up the trail bites harder than yesterday, each breath sending needles through your nostrils. 5 of you cram into the buckboard while Cutter and Thomas ride ahead. Red Mary claims the seat beside the driver. Anders settles next to coils of shiny copper and promptly nods off, chin bouncing with every frozen rut. Slim Pete never showed. Rumor says he took last night's philosophy lecture straight into a saloon and hasn't re-emerged. No one's surprised. The mules plod through crunchy snowfields, steam puffing from their muzzles like bargain bin locomotives. By mid-morning you crest a saddle where the wind barrels down as if the sky itself is clearing its throat. Cutter points to a line of spruce standing lonely against an endless white sweep. Camp there. We string 9 poles south before night or freeze in our britches. Simple plan, dire consequence. Everyone unloads gear while the wagon wheels groan to a halt, then dig pits for the sled runners that'll haul poles up slope. Axes ring against frozen ground with a sound midway between church bells and coffin lids. Each strike sends shivers up your elbows until your fingers tingle like bad telegraph static. Thomas demonstrates knotting a harness around his waist, hooking it to the pole sled, and leaning forward with a grunt that ripples through every muscle. You copy him, immediately questioning your choices. The first haul drags like you're towing a courthouse behind you. Halfway, your heel slips on glare ice and you slide backwards 10 feet, discovering gravity's sense of humor while the pole skids over your ankle. Mary laughs, bright, abrupt, then hoists her share without breaking stride. She claims she used to haul 2 calves at once back on her uncle's ranch. You believe her. Once poles are staged, you climb a freshly planted one to lash porcelain insulators. Frost coats each rung. Your gloves lose friction and you momentarily dangle one-handed, legs flailing until Anders braces the pole from below and encourages you in Swedish that sounds vaguely like a lullaby and a death threat combined. You clamp the insulator, twist the wire, watch it twang into perfect tension, one more vein connected in the continent's growing nervous system. Lunches a huddle behind a snowbank. Everyone hacks ice from their beards, Mary from the strands of hair peeking beneath her hat, and chews salted pork so tough the mules would sign liability waivers. Someone passes a tin cup of coffee as thick as wagon grease. You toss in a shaving of brown sugar, it sinks without trace and possibly dissolves the bottom of the cup, but the brew warms your gut enough to keep fingers articulate for another round of pole work. Afternoon sunlight slants hard, gilding the ridge and throwing long shadows like rungs on an endless ladder to the plains below. You've found rhythm, plant, climb, lash, descend, each pole a metronome tick in the sprawling telegraph score. But the sky to the west bruises purple, clouds stacking like poker chips, and Cutter's watchful eye starts twitching. Storm fronts marching, he mutters. Finish this line or dig your own snow cave. The last 3 poles become a relay. Thomas digs post holes with furious speed. Anders and Mary manhandle timbers upright while you and a lanky kid named Buck race to top out insulators, fingers numb beyond pain. Snow starts as a whisper, then a faster hush, then pellets knifing sideways. The world shrinks to a swirl of white flecks and the creak of wire. Finally, Cutter hollers, "Off the line." You half slide, half jump the final pole, stumble into knee-deep drift, and slog toward the spruce camp now half erased by flurries. Someone gets a fire going, Mary again coaxing sparks from damp tinder by sheer will, and soon a smoky blaze pops under a makeshift top. Inside the flickering circle you peel off gloves. See your fingertips gray-white. Slap them against your chest until sensation fizzles back with pins and needles agony. Thomas ladles snowmelt into a dented pot, sprinkles coffee grounds, and swears the storm will pass by dawn if the ridge spirits are merciful. Anders unwraps a sliver of cured reindeer sausage he's carried since Minnesota, slices it thin, and shares with the crew. It tastes like salt, smoke, and homesick dreams, but under this top it might as well be banquet fare. Hours blur into stories. The time Cutter strung wire across a canyon using a kite and nearly sailed off with it. Mary's recollection of breaking a wild Mustang that tried to drag her through a cactus thicket. Thomas explaining the Cherokee names for constellations now hidden behind cloud. Snow piles against the windbreak, hissing where heat escapes. You tip your head back, let sparks drift upward, and wonder how the finished wire will sound tomorrow, singing messages through the storm-polished air. When sleep creeps in, you wrap your bedroll tight, boots kept on to prevent frostbite, and let the storm's howl fade to a lull. Somewhere beyond the top, poles you planted stand in dark ranks, shoulders to the wind, carrying a silent conversation from here to a depot, hundreds of miles away. You've earned, what, 80 cents in 2 days? Hardly riches, yet there's a spark of pride glowing warmer than the fire. Each coin proof you've matched the west day for day, blow for blow, and haven't blinked first. Just before dreams claim you, the snow eases. A gap in clouds reveals a slice of moon so sharp it could carve a saddle. Wire hum hides under the wind, faint but certain. Messages will ride that line come morning, and you molasses-haired, thumb-bruised, storm-soaked you helped build the path. In a corner of your mind that sings louder than any fiddle in a feed barn, and sleep finally lands soft and deep as newly fallen snow. The storm stones the ridge all night, but by dawn its tantrum is spent, leaving a hush so complete you can hear frost fracturing in the spruce tops. The fire has slumped to a red eye under white ash. You wiggle out of your bedroll, joints clicking like telegraph relays after a long silence, and find Mary already breaking ice from the pot to coax a new flame. She nods toward the pale east where the sun pries itself over a sawtooth horizon and says you'd better take a look. You step away from camp and discover the world rebuilt, snow sculpted into smooth swells, every pole you raised standing to its waist in glitter, the wire drooping under a sugar frost mantle that turns each strand into a line of pearls. Cutter emerges last, beard rimmed solid. He surveys the sagging wire with an expression that would curdle cream, then barks for ladders and mittens. Ice must be knocked free before weight drags the line down or the porcelain insulators crack. The job falls to you and Anders, one man on the ladder with a hickory rod whacking gently upward, the other steadying from below, praying each tap doesn't snap copper. It's like persuading a frozen fiddle string to sing again. Tiny shards clatter off the wire, catching sunbeams and sprinkling rainbow dust onto your shoulders. When the sag lifts, Cutter measures tension by ear, plucks the wire like a bass string and listens for the proper hum. Satisfied, he sets Thomas and Buck to packing the sleds. Camp is moving west another mile now that the trail is knee-deep in powder. You help lash bundles while Mary stows leftover coffee grounds in a tin she calls her second medicine. Before departure, she presses half the contents into your palm, says it kills headache and loneliness if you boil it dark enough. You pocket the gift, grateful and resolve to ration it like gold dust. The miles roll beneath sled runners with an occasional jolt where hidden rocks lurk. Sun climbs, turns snow into mirror glare until your eyes ache even behind squinted lashes. Anders offers charcoal streaks. You rub a line beneath each lower lid and discover primitive sunglasses actually work. Noon finds the crew at a frozen creek. Cutter orders a halt. Water must be chopped for the mules and for cooking. You wield an axe, carving a hole while Thomas builds a corral of snow blocks to keep animals from breaking through. The ice is glass clear, and when chunks crack free you glimpse sluggish current below, black as ink and cold enough to pickle bone. Lunch is hardtack softened in melted snow with shreds of pork. It sticks in your molars but stokes your furnace. Anders pulls the cedar horse from his coat, sanding its flank with a bit of fine gritstone during respite. Each stroke releases the faint scent of northern forests, whisper of someplace not blanketed in frontier brutality. He glances at you and confesses worry the horse might never reach Minnesota. Mail coaches vanish under snow. Spring floods wash bridges away. You remind him the line you're stringing could carry a letter in seconds. Once rail and pony connect, and his carved message might be his heart wrapped in wood. He tucks it away more gently after that. A distant pop cracks through quiet, the unmistakable snap of wire failing somewhere upslope. Cutter curses, scrambles for spyglass and spots a leaning pole half buried beyond a stand of aspen. Ice weight must have taken it. Prayer means rerouting through a gully thick with drifts, but daylight's running downhill fast. He splits the crew. You, Mary, and Anders will cross the gully, set a temporary brace and splice the severed line while the others ferry poles for tomorrow's extension. Snow in the gully swallows your legs to mid-thigh. Each step lifts heavy like wading syrup. Your breath fogs into icy beards that tug when you turn your head. Mary leads, cutting a stair-step trench with her boots. At the fallen pole you see the break. Copper snapped ragged, whipping free in the wind like a rattlesnake. Static sizzles against your ear as you approach the wire still alive. Messages somewhere upstream trying to leap a gap, now humming open. Anders braces the pole upright while you climb, Mary feeding tools from below. At the top the view is all white layers and blue shadow. You sling the splice clamp, stripping sleet from copper with numbing fingers, then twist until your wrist screams. When the edges meet, current bites your arm. Nothing lethal, just a flash of angry tingle, and suddenly the hum steadies. Far away, someone's telegram of love or debt or war news sprints across your joint, none the wiser that a mouthful of snowfall and 3 stubborn hearts held their words aloft. Dusky gold finishes the sky as you descend. The gully is colder now, the wind sharpening. Mary breaks trail back, Anders dragging the sled of leftover timber.
Mid-slope he slips, the sled jerks, momentum yanks him forward, and pole ends clatter like dice. You lunge, grab his coat, both of you tumbling, but stopping short of a ravine lip. His laughter cracks out, half terror, half joy. You find yourself laughing too, breathless, snowpacking your collar, because in that moment, nothing exists but barreling life and the realization you're still inside it. Night has clawed in by the time you reach camp. Cutter has pitched the wall tent, stove inside, radiating a wavering orange halo. Everyone ducks through the flap one at a time like refugees into paradise. Water steams on the iron top, coffee grounds swirl, Mary's second medicine brewing into tar. You pass tin cups around, each sip thawing marrow. Cutter finally smiles, not wide, but enough to prove his face muscles still possess the memory. He counts heads, pronounces the day acceptable, and predicts 2 more until the county line station is live. Later, outside to relieve yourself, you glimpse the wire you repaired gleaming faintly in starlight, a silver thread stitching dark sky to darker earth. You think about Anders's cedar horse, about telegraph clicks winging homeward, about Mary, whose laugh is sharper than frost, yet somehow warmer than the stove. You realize frontier life isn't just brute endurance, it's countless small repairs of wire, of spirit, of roads between strangers, done by hands too cold to feel, yet too stubborn to quit. Back in the tent, you roll into blankets that still smell of smoke and pine, and for once the rustle of canvas overhead feels akin to feathers. Sleep comes swift. Somewhere poles creak, lines sing, and over the ridge a new storm tests its voice, but you're ready for its verses, armed with pliers, charcoal, and the memory of laughter tumbling through snow. Morning slips into camp on a gray whisper, and nobody moves until Cutter upends the coffee pot and bangs it like a dinner gong. The grounds from last night clump out in a wet plop, and he announces that's breakfast. Chew it slow, pretend it's jerky. You gnaw one bitter mouthful, decide imagination has limits, and instead scarf a sliver of Mary's corn cake shard you squirreled away. It's petrified enough to chip a tooth, but beats swallowing mud. Today's assignment is glory itself. Ride ahead with Anders to scout river crossings, so the mule team doesn't drown under tomorrow's load. Cutter lends you the camp's single gelding, Patch, named for the piebald blotch on his left eye, and for the fact every part of his tack is stitched from at least 3 previous saddles. Patch objects to 2 riders, so Anders walks, and you promise to stop if the horse quits before he does. The trail drops toward the valley, surrendering spruce to cottonwood skeletons glazed in hoarfrost. A quarter-mile out you spot boot prints crossing fresh snow, narrow, hurried, veering off the wagon path toward the bluffs. Probably Slim Pete finally sobering up and looking for civilization. You make a mental note to report it. Cutter will want his philosopher back before payroll. At the river you find the ice thick at banks but breathing mid-current, slabs flexing with a hollow boom that resonates in your kneecaps. You chip a test hole, dark water gurgles 2 inches below, no go for mules. Upstream the channel braids around gravel bars. Anders eyes a narrower chute where driftwood jams form a natural bridge. He proposes running a single line across using spare wire, tensioning it between trees, then rigging a block and tackle to ferry poles one at a time on a sled. You raise an eyebrow. Telegraph wire as river ferry rope. He shrugs. Copper's copper. Pull it back afterward and nobody's the wiser. You jot the scheme on a scrap of brown paper, include a sketch that looks like a spider wearing skis, and tuck it in your coat. Return trip brings flurries and the uneasy silence of something watching. Patch snorts, ears swiveling. You round a bend and spot a lone rider slumped in the saddle, horse picking its own pace. Closer, you recognize Slim Pete, hat missing, eyes glassy. He waves a flask half-heartedly, skids sideways, and nearly topples. You grab the reins before he slides clean off. Incoherent babble suggests he's been arguing with philosophy or with vultures, unclear which. Anders rigs a lead rope to your saddle horn. Pete's horse follows like a penitent goat. Back at camp, Cutter sees the procession and mutters that next time he'll hire a cactus. At least it stands up straight. Nonetheless, he gives you credit for retrieving lost manpower and pays a whole $1 advance, more coin than you've held in months. Mary claps at the river plan, calling it Scandinavian cleverness, which makes Anders glow like ember. Thomas inspects your sketch, nods, and adds a note about anchoring the downstream side with deadman stakes, scribbling in charcoal on the margin. Storm clouds muster but hold distance. Dusk shows a stranger's light flickering across the valley. Soon a rider trots in. Rail company inspector sporting a bowler hat dusted white and a mustache stiff enough to scrape ice. He demands to see yesterday's splice, quoting regulations none of you have read. cutter's jaw muscles twitch, yet he leads the inspector up the gully. You tag along, heart thudding. If that joint's off spec, you'll be shipped back east to shovel coal. But under the lantern's yellow eye, the splice gleams tight, wire tuned to perfect pitch. The inspector plucks it, listens, grunts approval, and produces a stamped chit, authorizing hazard bonus, an extra 15 cents each. Anders whispers that's almost luxury enough to mail 2 letters, not 1. He might send the cedar horse early. Supper is a victory stew. Mary dumps everything edible into the kettle. Beans, pork rind, crushed apple cores, a handful of snow for broth. The mix looks like wet gravel, smells like heaven, and burns your tongue in the best possible way. Slim Pete surfaces long enough to quote Socrates on moderation, then passes out snoring under the sled. Later you stand aside the line, thumb stroking the new coin in your pocket, listening to the night wind vibrate faint messages overhead. Somewhere someone's life is changing because your mittened hands kept copper singing. You think of the river tomorrow, of wire doubling as lifeline over black water, of mules clopping across makeshift bridges while snowflakes swirl like confetti for no audience but the sky. The frontier tosses tests without pause, but for every ice-loaded pole and soul-frozen philosopher, you and this ragtag corps keep tapping back. Still here, still mending, still moving west. The stove crackles a final lullaby. You let the darkness close, confident that dawn will find you hammering stakes into riverbanks and convincing stubborn mules to trust a strand of copper just thick enough to carry weight and hope across a winter current. Out here, that's about as close to sorcery as anyone needs.